The letter trembled in Penelope Owens's hands as the stagecoach rattled toward Evanston, Wyoming, carrying her further from everything she had ever known and closer to a man whose face she had seen only in a single faded photograph. She pressed her forehead against the dusty window, watching the endless prairie roll past, trying to calm the frantic beating of her heart. It was September of 1882, and at 22 years old, she was about to become the wife of a complete stranger because the alternative had been starvation in Philadelphia. Her father had died 6 months ago, leaving nothing but debts, and her mother had followed him to the grave just 8 weeks later, worn down by grief and consumption. Penelope had answered the advertisement for a mail-order bride because she had nowhere else to go and no other prospects. The man who had written back, Graham Foster, owned a cattle ranch outside Evanston and needed a wife to help manage his household. His letters had been polite, even kind, but they told her almost nothing about who he truly was. The other passenger in the coach, an elderly woman named Mrs. Henderson, who was traveling to visit her son, patted Penelope's hand. "You look terrified, dear. Is this your first time out west?" "Yes, madam. I am going to meet my intended." Penelope's voice came out smaller than she wished. "A mail-order arrangement, Mrs." Henderson's eyes were sympathetic rather than judgmental. "I know it seems frightening now, but many such marriages work out well. My own niece came west the same way 5 years ago, and she and her husband have 3 beautiful children now. They are quite happy." Penelope tried to smile, but her stomach churned with anxiety. It was not just the uncertainty of meeting Graham that terrified her. For the past 3 weeks, ever since she had left Philadelphia, she had barely slept. The nightmares came every time she closed her eyes, vivid and horrible memories of the night 2 men had broken into the boarding house where she had been staying. They had been looking for money, but they had found her instead. She had fought them off with a fireplace poker, screaming until the landlady and her husband came running, but the terror of those moments had carved itself into her bones. Now, whenever darkness fell and she tried to sleep, she saw their faces again, felt their hands grabbing at her. She would jerk awake, heart pounding, unable to breathe. The stagecoach rolled into Evanston just as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The town was larger than Penelope had expected, with a proper main street lined with wooden buildings, a church with a white steeple, and even a 2-story hotel. The driver called out that they had arrived, and Mrs. Henderson squeezed her hand one more time. "Courage, dear. You are stronger than you know." Penelope climbed down from the coach on shaky legs, her traveling dress wrinkled and dusty. She looked around the busy street, wondering which of the men she saw might be Graham Foster. Her hands clutched her carpetbag so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Miss Owens." The voice came from behind her, deep and quiet. She turned and found herself looking up at a tall man with broad shoulders and sun-weathered skin. He was older than she had expected, perhaps in his early 30s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of cedar bark. He held his hat in his hands, turning it nervously, and his expression was cautious but not unkind. He wore work clothes, dusty boots, and a vest over a plain cotton shirt, exactly what she would expect from a rancher. "Mr. Foster," she managed to say. "Yes, madam, Graham Foster. I am glad you made it here safely. Was the journey very difficult?" "It was long," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I am grateful to be here." He nodded, seeming as uncertain as she felt. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the evidence of years spent squinting into the sun. His hands were calloused and scarred from hard work, but they looked gentle. "I have the wagon just over there. We can collect your trunk and head out to the ranch before dark if that suits you. Or if you would prefer, we could stay in town tonight at the hotel and you could rest. The ranch is about an hour's drive. The thought of spending another night in an unfamiliar place, another night trying and failing to sleep, made her chest tighten. But the ranch would be unfamiliar too. Everything was unfamiliar now. "Whatever you think best," she said. Graham studied her face for a moment, and something in his expression softened. "You look exhausted. Let us get a room at the hotel. You can have a proper meal and a good night's rest. We can go out to the ranch tomorrow when you are feeling stronger." Relief flooded through her, though she knew the rest would not come easily. "Thank you. That is very kind." He helped her retrieve her trunk from the stagecoach, lifting it as though it weighed nothing, and led her across the street to the Evanston Hotel. The proprietor, a middle-aged man with a thick mustache, greeted Graham by name. "Mr. Foster, good to see you. Will you be needing a room?" "2 rooms," Graham said firmly, and Penelope felt another flutter of relief. "This is Miss Owens. We are to be married, but she just arrived and I want her to be comfortable." The proprietor's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded and produced 2 keys. "Of course. Rooms 7 and 8 upstairs. Will you both be wanting supper?" "Yes, please. In about an hour, if that is all right." Graham carried her trunk upstairs and set it inside room 7, which was small but clean, with a bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the main street. "I will be right next door in room 8, he said. "You take all the time you need to freshen up. I will knock when supper is ready, all right." "Thank you," Penelope said again. She seemed unable to say anything else. After he left, she sank down on the bed and tried to gather herself. Graham seemed decent, which was more than she had dared to hope for. But decent or not, she would be marrying him tomorrow or the next day, binding her life to his, moving to his isolated ranch. And she still could not sleep. The exhaustion pulled at her like a physical weight, making her eyes burn and her head ache, but she knew that when night fell and she lay down, the nightmares would come. She washed her face and changed into a cleaner dress, one of only 3 she owned now. By the time Graham knocked on her door, the sun had set, and the hotel was lit with oil lamps that cast warm, flickering light. They ate supper in the hotel's small dining room, which was nearly empty at this hour. Graham had ordered pot roast with potatoes and carrots, and though Penelope had not thought she was hungry, the food was good and warm, and she found herself eating more than she expected. "Tell me about Philadelphia," Graham said, clearly trying to put her at ease. "I have never been further east than Kansas." She told him about the city, about the markets and the noise and the crowds, about her father's bookshop that had failed when the bigger stores moved in, about her mother's garden that had been her pride and joy. She did not tell him about the boarding house or the 2 men or the reason she could not sleep. That felt too raw, too frightening to speak aloud. Graham listened with genuine interest, asking questions, and gradually, Penelope began to relax slightly. He told her about his ranch, which he had built up over the past 8 years, about his cattle and horses, about the housekeeper who came 3 times a week but had her own family to tend to. "It is a good life," he said, "but it is a hard one, especially in winter. I will not lie to you about that. But the house is solid and we have everything we need. I hope you will be happy there." "I will try my best," she said, meaning it. After supper, they stood awkwardly in the upstairs hallway. Graham looked like he wanted to say something more but was not sure how. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Miss Owens, I know this situation is not what either of us might have chosen if circumstances were different. But I want you to know that I will do my best to be a good husband to you. I will not rush you or force you into anything. We can take our time getting to know each other." I am hoping we can build something good together." The kindness in his words made her throat tighten. "Thank you, Mr. Foster. I appreciate that more than you know." "You should call me Graham," he said with a small smile. "If we are going to be married, we should at least use our given names." "Then you should call me Penelope." "Penelope." He said her name carefully as though testing how it felt. "It is a beautiful name. Get some rest. I will see you in the morning." He disappeared into room 8, and Penelope went into room 7, closing the door behind her. She prepared for bed slowly, braiding her long dark hair, washing her face again, changing into her nightgown. The bed looked soft and inviting, but her heart was already starting to race with dread. She blew out the lamp and lay down in the darkness, pulling the quilt up to her chin. For perhaps 20 minutes she lay still, trying to relax, trying to think of peaceful things. But then the memories came creeping in. The sound of breaking glass, heavy footsteps, a rough hand clamping over her mouth. She sat up abruptly, gasping, her whole body shaking. She could not do this. She could not lie here in the dark, waiting for the nightmares to overwhelm her. She got out of bed and paced the small room, wrapping her arms around herself. Maybe if she stayed awake a little longer, exhausted herself further, she would be too tired for the nightmares. But she knew it did not work that way. She had tried before. A soft knock on the door made her jump. "Penelope, are you all right?" Graham's voice, quiet and concerned, came through the wood. She froze, mortified. Had she been making noise? Had her gasping been loud enough to hear through the wall? She went to the door but did not open it. "I am fine," she called softly. "I apologize if I disturbed you." There was a pause. "You sound frightened. Is something wrong with the room?" "No, the room is fine. She did not know how to explain. "I just have trouble sleeping sometimes." Another pause, longer this time. "May I come in? Just to talk? I will leave the door open if that makes you more comfortable." She hesitated, then opened the door. Graham stood there in his shirt sleeves, no vest or hat, looking worried. The lamplight from the hallway cast his face in shadow. "I do not mean to intrude," he said, "but you sound genuinely distressed. If there is anything I can do to help, I want to." The concern in his voice broke something open inside her, and suddenly she was crying, tears streaming down her face before she could stop them. She pressed her hands to her mouth, horrified at herself, but Graham stepped forward instinctively, then stopped, clearly not wanting to frighten her. "Hey now, it is all right. Whatever it is, we can figure it out." "I cannot sleep," she said through her tears. "I have not been able to sleep properly in weeks. Every time I close my eyes, I have nightmares. I am so tired, but I cannot make them stop." His expression filled with sympathy. "Nightmares about what? Can you tell me?" She told him haltingly about the break-in at the boarding house, about the men and the terror, and how she still felt their hands on her every time darkness fell. The words spilled out of her in a rush, and once she started, she could not stop. "I know it is foolish," she said. "They did not actually hurt me. The landlady came in time, but I cannot stop being afraid." "It is not foolish," Graham said firmly. "Not even a little bit. You went through something terrible, and of course it affected you. There is no shame in that." He looked around the room, then back at her. "What if I sat out here in the hallway, just for tonight? Would that help? Knowing someone was right outside your door, keeping watch." She stared at him, not understanding at first. "You would do that?" "Of course I would. If it helps you feel safe enough to rest, I would gladly do it." "But you would be sitting on the floor all night. That is absurd. You need to sleep too." He waved a hand dismissively. "I have slept in far worse places, I promise you. I spent 2 years sleeping on the ground when I was first starting the ranch. A hallway floor is nothing." "I cannot ask you to do that." "You are not asking, I am offering." His eyes were steady and kind. "Penelope, you are going to be my wife. Your well-being matters to me. If sitting in the hallway helps you get some rest, then that is what I will do." She wanted to protest further, but the truth was that the idea of having someone standing guard, someone between her and the door, did make her feel safer. "Just for tonight," she whispered. "Just for tonight," he agreed. He went back to his room and returned with a pillow and a blanket. He settled himself on the floor right outside her door, his back against the wall. "You go on and try to sleep," he said. "I will be right here. Nothing is going to get past me." Penelope retreated back into her room but left the door slightly ajar so she could see him there. She climbed back into bed and lay down, her heart still racing but not quite as frantically. She could hear the small sounds of Graham shifting, getting comfortable. The knowledge that he was there, that someone was watching over her, made the darkness feel less oppressive. "Graham." She called softly. "Yes, thank you." "No need to thank me, just try to rest." She closed her eyes and, miracle of miracles, did not immediately see the faces of the men from the boarding house. She saw only darkness, warm and soft. Her breathing slowed. The exhaustion that had been dragging at her for weeks finally pulled her down into sleep. When she woke, pale morning light was streaming through the window. She sat up, disoriented, and realized with a shock that she had slept through the entire night without waking once. She got out of bed and looked out into the hallway. Graham was still there, though he was shifting stiffly, clearly feeling the effects of spending the night on a hard floor. He looked up when he heard her door open and gave her a tired smile. "Good morning. How did you sleep?" "I slept," she said, still marveling at it. "I actually slept. I cannot remember the last time I slept through a whole night." His smile widened. "Good, I am glad. You must be miserable, your back must ache terribly." He stood up, stretching and wincing. "A bit stiff, but nothing that will not work itself out. It was worth it to see you looking rested." They had breakfast together in the hotel dining room, and Graham asked if she felt ready to travel out to the ranch, or if she needed another day in town. Penelope thought about it and realized that she did feel stronger, more settled. "I think I am ready," she said. "If the offer still stands, I mean, if you still want to marry me." Graham looked surprised. "Of course I do. Why would you think otherwise?" "Because I am a mess," she said bluntly. "You have known me for less than a day, and already you have had to sit up all night taking care of me. That is not what you signed up for when you sent for a mail-order bride." He reached across the table and took her hand, the first time he had touched her beyond helping her down from the stage coach. His palm was warm and rough with calluses. "Penelope, everyone has things they are dealing with. You have been through something terrible, and you are doing your best to cope with it. That does not make you a mess. It makes you human. I still want to marry you if you still want to marry me." She looked down at their joined hands and felt something shift in her chest, something that felt almost like hope. "I do," she said quietly. They were married that afternoon in the small church on the edge of town, with the minister and his wife serving as witnesses. Penelope wore her best dress, which was still rumpled from travel, and Graham wore a clean shirt and his good vest. The ceremony was simple and brief, and when the minister pronounced them man and wife, Graham kissed her cheek gently, as though she were made of glass. They drove out to the ranch in Graham's wagon, a sturdy vehicle pulled by 2 patient horses. The landscape was breathtaking in its vastness, rolling prairie dotted with sagebrush, with mountains visible in the distance. The sky seemed impossibly large, stretching from horizon to horizon with nothing to interrupt it. Penelope had never seen so much empty space in her life. The ranch itself was nestled in a valley with a stream running through it. The house was bigger than she had expected, a 2-story wooden structure with a wide porch and real glass windows. There was a barn, a corral with horses, and fields where cattle grazed in the distance. It looked solid and permanent, like it had been there forever, though Graham told her he had built most of it himself with the help of some hired men. "It is beautiful," Penelope said, meaning it. Graham looked pleased. "It is home, our home now." He showed her through the house, which was clean but clearly lacked a woman's touch. The furniture was simple and functional, the kitchen well-stocked but disorganized. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs. Graham had already moved his things into the smaller one, leaving the larger room for her. "I meant what I said about not rushing you," he told her. "You can have your own space for as long as you need it." That night, after a simple supper that they prepared together, Penelope prepared for bed in her new room. It was comfortable, with a bed even larger than the one at the hotel, a wardrobe for her few belongings, and curtains that she could draw against the darkness. But as night fell and she lay down, the anxiety began to creep back in. The house was so quiet out here, so isolated. Any sound at all seemed magnified. She tried to sleep but could not. After an hour of tossing and turning, she heard a soft knock on her door. "Penelope, are you all right?" She got up and opened the door. Graham stood there looking concerned. "I heard you moving around. Are the nightmares back?" "I have not even been able to fall asleep," she admitted. "I am sorry. I know you need your rest. You have work to do tomorrow." "Nothing that cannot wait." He looked down the hallway, then back at her. "Would it help if I sat outside your door again, like at the hotel?" She wanted to say no, wanted to tell him that she could not ask him to do that every night, that she needed to get over this herself. But the truth was that it had helped, and she was so desperately tired. "If you do not mind," she whispered. "I do not mind at all." He got his blanket and pillow and settled himself outside her door again. Penelope lay down and found that the knowledge of his presence did help, just as it had before. She fell asleep within minutes. This became their pattern over the next several nights. Graham would sit outside her door until she fell asleep, then retire to his own room for what remained of the night. During the days, Penelope threw herself into learning how to run the ranch household. She cleaned and organized, learned how to cook on the big iron stove, tended the vegetable garden that had been neglected since the previous housekeeper had cut back her hours. Graham worked with the cattle and horses, rode out to check on the herds, mended fences, and did the 100 other tasks that running a ranch required. They fell into an easy companionship during the daylight hours. Graham was patient and kind, quick to laugh and slow to anger. He taught her how to ride one of the gentler horses, how to tell which vegetables were ready for harvest, how to read the sky for signs of coming weather. Penelope found herself looking forward to their meals together, to the conversations they shared on the porch in the evenings, to the way his face lit up when he talked about the ranch and his plans for its future. But every night, the ritual continued. She would prepare for bed, anxiety mounting, and then Graham would knock softly and take up his post outside her door. She slept through the night every time he was there. On the rare occasions when he had to be away, checking on cattle in the far pastures and not returning until morning, she barely slept at all. After 2 weeks of this, Penelope knew she could not ask him to keep sacrificing his own comfort indefinitely. She had to find another solution. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, she brought it up. "Graham, we need to talk about the sleeping arrangements." He looked at her with those steady cedar-colored eyes. "All right. You cannot keep sleeping in the hallway. Or trying to sleep, I should say. It is not fair to you and it is not sustainable. I need to find a way to manage this on my own." "Maybe," he said slowly, "there is another option." "What do you mean?" He looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair. "What if I slept in your room?" "Not in the bed," he added quickly, "but on the floor or in a chair. That way I could get more rest and you would still have someone there keeping watch. It would be more comfortable than the hallway at any rate. Penelope considered this. They were married after all. It was not improper for them to share a room, and the truth was that she trusted him. In the 2 weeks since she had arrived, he had been nothing but respectful and patient. "You would not mind?" she asked. "I would not offer if I minded. I want you to be able to rest, Penelope. And I want to get more than 3 hours of sleep myself, if I am being honest." She smiled at that. "All right, we can try it." That night, Graham moved a chair into her room, positioning it near the door. He brought his blanket and settled into it while Penelope lay in the bed. It was strange at first, being in the same room with him, but also comforting. He was close enough that she could hear his breathing, steady and reassuring. "Graham," she said into the darkness. "Yes. Why are you being so kind to me? You could have sent me back. You could have decided this was too much trouble." There was a long pause. "When I was 16, he said finally, "my family's farm in Missouri was attacked by raiders during the last year of the war. They killed my father and my older brother. I hid in the cellar and listened to it happen, too scared to come out and help. For years afterward, I could not sleep through the night. I would wake up hearing gunshots that were not there, hearing my father calling for help. I know what it is like to be haunted by something you could not control. I know what it is like to be terrified of the dark." Penelope's heart ached for him. "I am so sorry. That is horrible. It was a long time ago. I am mostly all right now, but I remember how it felt, and I would not wish that on anyone. So no, I am not about to abandon you for struggling with something that is not your fault. How did you get past it? The nightmares, I mean." "Time, mostly, and hard work. Building this ranch gave me something to focus on, something that was mine, something those raiders could never touch. And I had my mother with me for a while until she passed 3 years ago. Having her there helped. You still have nightmares sometimes, once in a great while, but not like I used to." She heard the chair creak as he shifted. "You will get through this too, Penelope, I promise. It just takes time." She fell asleep feeling less alone than she had in months. The chair arrangement worked better than the hallway, but after a few nights, it became clear that Graham was not getting quality rest. Penelope would wake in the morning to find him stiff and uncomfortable, his neck bent at an awkward angle. She felt guilty every time she saw him wincing as he stood up. Finally, she made a decision. One evening, after they had both prepared for bed, she spoke before he could settle into the chair. "Graham, this is ridiculous. The bed is large enough for both of us. We can put extra pillows down the middle if you want, but you need to actually sleep, not just sit in a chair all night." He looked uncertain. "Are you sure? I do not want to make you uncomfortable." "You have done nothing but try to make me comfortable since the moment I arrived," she said. "I trust you, and we are married. There is no reason we cannot share a bed like married people do." "All right," he said slowly, "but if you change your mind at any point, just say so." They arranged pillows down the middle of the bed as a sort of boundary and lay down on either side. Penelope was very aware of his presence, of the warmth radiating from his side of the bed, of the sound of his breathing. But it was not frightening. It was comforting. She fell asleep quickly and slept deeply, and when she woke in the morning, some of the pillows had been pushed aside in the night, and she was closer to the center of the bed than she had started. Graham was still asleep, his face relaxed and peaceful. She watched him for a moment, studying the curve of his jaw, the sweep of his dark eyelashes, and felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Over the following weeks, as autumn deepened and the air turned crisp, Penelope found herself growing increasingly fond of her husband. He was unfailingly kind and thoughtful, but also funny and good company. He told her stories about the other ranchers in the area, about the time his prize bull escaped and led him on a chase halfway across the county, about learning to rope cattle and getting himself tangled up instead. She told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, about her father's love of books and her mother's talent for growing flowers in the tiny yard behind their house. The nightmares became less frequent. Some nights she still woke in a panic, but Graham was always right there, quick to reassure her, to remind her that she was safe. Other nights, she slept straight through until dawn. The pillows that had initially divided the bed gradually disappeared, until they were sleeping side by side with nothing between them. One morning in late October, Penelope woke to find Graham's arm draped over her waist, his chest pressed against her back. She held very still, not wanting to wake him, and realized that she liked this feeling. She liked being close to him. She liked the solid warmth of him, the security of his embrace. When he finally stirred and realized where his arm was, he started to pull away with a mumbled apology, but she caught his hand and held it in place. "It is all right," she said softly. "I do not mind." He went still. "Penelope." She rolled over to face him. In the early morning light, his eyes looked almost golden. "I know we got married for practical reasons," she said, "but I need you to know that I am glad it was you. I am glad I came here. I am glad you are my husband." His expression filled with something that looked like wonder. "I am glad too. So glad. I know I am not much of a romantic and I am not good with pretty words, but I care about you. More than I thought I would. More than I probably should after only 6 weeks. I care about you too," she whispered. He reached up and touched her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her cheek. "Can I kiss you? Really kiss you, I mean?" "Yes," she breathed. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, and then his lips met hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, but when she responded, sliding her hand into his hair, it deepened into something that made her toes curl and her heart race for entirely different reasons than fear. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," Graham admitted, his forehead resting against hers. "Why did you wait so long?" "I did not want to rush you. I wanted you to be ready." She kissed him again, pouring all her gratitude and affection into it. "I am ready now." They made love that morning as the sun rose, slow and sweet, and a bit uncertain since neither of them had much experience, but filled with care and genuine feeling. Afterward, Penelope lay in Graham's arms and felt completely safe for the first time since the night of the break-in. The nightmares had not disappeared entirely, but their power over her had broken. She was healing, and the man holding her was a large part of why. As autumn turned to winter, their relationship deepened into something neither of them had anticipated. They talked for hours every evening, learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. Graham told her about his hope to expand the ranch, to build up the herd so they would have real security. Penelope confessed that she had always wanted to learn to read music and play the piano, though her family had never been able to afford lessons. Graham said that, come spring, he would buy a piano for the parlor and find her a teacher in town. They worked side by side during the day, Penelope taking on more of the ranch responsibilities as she learned and grew more confident. She learned to help with the horses, to mend tack, to keep the account books for the ranch. Graham was patient with her mistakes and generous with his praise when she succeeded. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, her reading aloud from one of the books she had brought from Philadelphia, while he carved small wooden figures, a hobby he had picked up years ago. Winter arrived with a vengeance, bringing snow that piled high against the sides of the house and winds that howled through the valley. There were days when Graham could not get out to check on the cattle, when they were essentially trapped inside together. Penelope discovered that she did not mind at all. She liked being snowed in with her husband, like the enforced intimacy of it, the way they had to rely on each other for everything. On Christmas Eve, Graham presented her with a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a delicate silver locket on a chain. "It was my mother's," he said. "I want you to have it." Penelope's eyes filled with tears. "Graham, I cannot take your mother's jewelry. She would want you to have it. She would have liked you very much." He helped her fasten it around her neck. "You are my family now, Penelope. You are everything to me." "You are everything to me too," she said, and kissed him. She gave him a gift as well, a new leather-bound journal that she had ordered from the general store on one of their trips to town before the snows came, along with a fine pen. "For writing down your plans for the ranch," she explained. "And maybe other things too. Thoughts, observations. You have a good mind, and I think you should record your ideas." He looked touched. "This is wonderful, thank you." They made love in front of the fire that night, the warmth of the flames dancing across their skin, and Penelope thought that she had never been happier in her entire life. Spring came slowly, the snow melting in patches, revealing the brown grass beneath. The stream that ran through the property swelled with runoff, and the cattle that had huddled together all winter began to spread out across the pastures again. Penelope discovered that she was pregnant in early April, and when she told Graham, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see the answer on his face. "Happy." "Penelope, I am thrilled. I am terrified too, but mostly thrilled." He set her down carefully as though she had suddenly become fragile. "Are you feeling all right? Do you need anything? Should you be resting?" She laughed at his concern. "I am fine. Women have babies every day. I am not made of glass." But he fussed over her anyway, insisting she not lift anything heavy, making sure she ate enough, asking constantly how she felt. It was sweet, even if it was occasionally excessive. True to his word, Graham had a piano delivered to the house in May, hauled all the way from Evanston in a specially rented wagon. It was not a grand instrument, but it was well made and perfectly adequate. He arranged for the minister's wife, who was an accomplished pianist, to come give Penelope lessons twice a week. Penelope threw herself into learning, and soon the house was filled with music, sometimes beautiful and sometimes halting, but always enthusiastic. The ranch thrived that summer. The herd grew, the hay harvest was abundant, and Graham was able to hire 2 permanent ranch hands to help with the work. This gave him more time to spend with Penelope, which they both appreciated as her belly swelled with their growing child. One night in late July, Penelope woke from a nightmare, the first she had had in months. She was breathing hard, tangled in the sheets, and for a moment she was back in that boarding house, back in the terror. But then Graham's arms came around her, solid and real, and his voice was in her ear. "You are safe. I am here. You are safe." She clung to him, and he held her until the shaking stopped. "I thought they were gone," she said. "The nightmares. I thought I was past all that. Healing is not always linear," he said gently. "Sometimes things come back, especially when you are stressed or tired. But look how far you have come. This is the first one in months, and you know you can get through it because you have before." "I do not know what I would have done if you had not been there that first night," she said. "If you had not cared enough to sit outside my door." "I will always be here," he promised, "for as long as you need me, for as long as we both live." Their son was born in December, right before Christmas, during a snowstorm that prevented the doctor from reaching the ranch in time. Graham delivered the baby himself with the help of the midwife from the neighboring ranch who managed to make it through the drifts. It was terrifying and painful and beautiful all at once, and when Penelope finally held her son in her arms, she wept with joy and relief. "He is perfect," Graham said, his voice thick with emotion. He touched the baby's tiny hand with one calloused finger. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas after Penelope's father. He was a healthy, loud baby with a good pair of lungs and his father's dark hair. Graham was besotted from the first moment, constantly holding him, talking to him, showing him around the ranch even though Thomas was far too young to understand or care. Watching Graham with their son, Penelope felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. This man who had been a stranger a year ago was now the center of her world, the father of her child, the person she loved more than anyone else on earth. And she knew, without a doubt, that he felt the same way about her. The nightmares continued to fade over the following year, until they were nothing more than an occasional bad dream, easily shaken off. Penelope no longer needed Graham to stand guard for her to feel safe. But she still liked sleeping beside him, still found comfort in his presence, still sometimes woke in the night and watched him sleep, grateful beyond words that fate had brought her to this man. When Thomas was a year old, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. This time she felt more confident, less afraid. Graham was predictably thrilled, and he and Thomas would sometimes sit together with Graham's hand on Penelope's belly, feeling the baby kick. Thomas, now an energetic toddler, did not really understand what was happening but enjoyed the attention. Their second child, a daughter they named Clara after Graham's mother, was born in the autumn of 1885. She was smaller than Thomas had been, with lighter hair and her mother's eyes. The birth was easier this time, with the doctor able to be present, and Penelope recovered quickly. Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew, the herd expanded, and the ranch prospered. They added on to the house, building a larger kitchen and an extra bedroom. Graham hired more help, allowing him to focus on the business side of ranching while still being present for his family. Penelope's piano playing improved, and she began teaching Clara basic chords when the little girl was old enough to reach the keys. The marriage that had begun as a practical arrangement between strangers had transformed into a deep and abiding love. They celebrated their 5th anniversary in September of 1887, and Graham took Penelope into Evanston for a special dinner at the hotel, the same hotel where they had spent their first night. They left the children with the housekeeper and enjoyed an evening that was just for the two of them. "Do you remember how terrified I was that first night?" Penelope asked as they walked hand in hand down the main street. "I could barely string 2 words together." "I remember," Graham said. "I was pretty nervous myself. I kept worrying that you would take one look at me and want to get back on the next stagecoach east." "I never wanted that," she said. "Even when I was scared, I always felt like I could trust you. That was the best night of my life, you know, or the start of it anyway. Sitting outside your door, making sure you were safe. I knew then that I was going to fall in love with you. I did not expect it to happen so fast, but I knew it was inevitable." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "I love you, Graham Foster. More than I thought it was possible to love anyone." He kissed her right there on the street, not caring who might see. "I love you too. You and the children are the best things that ever happened to me." They returned to the ranch the next day to find that Thomas had taught himself to saddle one of the gentler horses, with mixed results, and Clara had decided to help by feeding the chickens an entire bag of grain. The house was chaos, and it was perfect. 3 more children followed over the next 6 years. 2 boys and another girl, filling the house with noise and laughter and the organized chaos that came with a large family. Graham expanded the ranch further, buying adjacent land and building up a reputation for quality cattle that made them prosperous. Penelope became known in the area for her kindness and her music, often playing at church services and community gatherings. The years were not without challenges. There were hard winters, sick animals, injuries, and all the normal struggles of ranch life. But they faced everything together, supporting each other through difficulties and celebrating victories. The partnership they had built that first night, when Graham had chosen to sit outside her door and keep watch, remained the foundation of everything they created together. On their 15th anniversary, Graham surprised Penelope with a trip to Denver, their first extended time away from the ranch since their children had been born. They spent a week in the city, attending concerts and shows, dining in fine restaurants, and simply enjoying each other's company without the constant demands of the ranch and children. It was wonderful, but they were both eager to return home by the end of it. As they rode back toward the ranch in the wagon, the familiar landscape spreading out before them, Penelope reflected on how much her life had changed since that terrified girl had stepped off the stagecoach in Evanston 15 years ago. She had been so afraid then, so broken by what had happened to her, unable to even sleep through the night. Now she was strong and confident, a mother of 5, a partner in a successful ranching operation, and most importantly, deeply and completely loved. "What are you thinking about?" Graham asked, noticing her expression. "About how lucky I am," she said. "About how different my life could have been if you had not been so patient and kind that first night." "I am the lucky one," he said. "You took a chance on a stranger in a place you had never been. That took real courage." "We were both taking a chance," she pointed out, "and it worked out better than either of us could have imagined." They crested the hill that overlooked their valley, and there it was, the ranch they had built together, the house that held their children and their life. Smoke curled from the chimney, and she could see small figures running around in the yard, probably the children playing some elaborate game. "Home," Graham said softly. "Home," she agreed, and she could not imagine anywhere else she would rather be. That evening, after the children were in bed and the house was finally quiet, Graham and Penelope sat on the porch as they had so many evenings over the years. The stars were brilliant overhead, scattered across the sky like diamonds. She leaned against him, his arm around her shoulders, and felt completely content. "You ever have nightmares anymore?" Graham asked quietly. It was something they rarely discussed now, that dark time at the beginning of their marriage. "Almost never," she said. "Maybe once or twice a year, and even then they are not as bad as they used to be. I wake up, remember where I am and who I am with, and I can go right back to sleep." "I am glad," he said. "I hated seeing you so afraid." "You saved me," she said simply. "Not just that first night, but every night after. You gave me time and space to heal. You never pushed or demanded. You just kept showing up, kept being there until I was strong enough to stand on my own again." "We saved each other," he corrected. "I was just going through the motions before you arrived. The ranch was successful, but I was lonely. I did not realize how lonely until you were here. You brought life to this place, Penelope. You brought joy and music and laughter. You made it a home instead of just a place where I worked and slept." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, the distant lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, the whisper of wind through the grass. These were the sounds of their life, as familiar as their own heartbeats. "I would do it all again," Penelope said. "Every bit of it. The fear, the uncertainty, all of it. Because it led me here to you, to this life we have built together." "So would I," Graham said. "Every single moment." He kissed the top of her head, and they stayed like that until the night grew cold and they went inside together. To the home they had made, to the life they had chosen, to the love that had grown from the simplest act of kindness on a dark night 15 years ago. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. Their children grew into fine young people. Thomas took to ranching naturally, learning everything his father could teach him. Clara proved to have her mother's musical talent, and eventually went to school in Denver to study music, before returning to teach in Evanston. The younger children each found their own paths, some staying close to home, others venturing further afield, but all carrying with them the values their parents had instilled. Graham and Penelope grew older together, their hair going gray, their faces gaining lines, but their love never diminishing. They had built something lasting, not just in the ranch that now encompassed thousands of acres and supported not only their own family, but several other families who worked for them, but in the relationship that had started so unexpectedly. People in the area knew their story, how the mail-order bride had been too afraid to sleep, and how the rancher had sat outside her door all night to help her feel safe. It became something of a legend, a testament to kindness and patience and the unexpected ways love could bloom. Young couples would sometimes ask them for advice, and Graham always said the same thing. Show up, be patient, care about the other person's well-being as much as your own. Everything else will follow, Penelope would add, and be willing to be vulnerable. Let the other person see your fears and weaknesses. That is where real intimacy comes from. On their 30th anniversary, their children threw them a party that brought together friends and neighbors from all over the county. There was music and dancing and speeches, and at the end of the evening, Graham and Penelope danced together as they had not done in years. His steps were slower now, and her back ached if she stood too long, but they moved together with the ease of 3 decades of partnership. "Still glad you answered that advertisement?" Graham asked, a teasing note in his voice. "Best decision I ever made," Penelope said without hesitation. Best decision I ever made," he echoed. "Though I will admit I had no idea what I was getting into that day at the stagecoach." "Neither did I, but we figured it out together." "We did," he agreed, "and we will keep figuring it out for as many years as we have left." They had 15 more years together after that, 15 good years full of grandchildren, and continued prosperity, and the deep comfort that came from knowing another person completely. When Graham passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1912, at the age of 62, Penelope grieved deeply, but also felt profound gratitude. They had been given 45 years together, far more than either of them had expected that day in 1882, when she had stepped off the stagecoach in Evanston. She lived 7 more years, continuing to play piano, to tend her garden, to dote on her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She never remarried. No one else could have been what Graham had been to her. When she passed away quietly in her sleep in the summer of 1919, surrounded by family, her last thoughts were of that first night, of lying in the darkness in a strange hotel room, terrified and exhausted, and hearing Graham's voice through the door. "Nothing is going to get past me," he had promised, and for 45 years nothing had. He had kept her safe, had loved her completely, had been her partner and her friend and the great love of her life. Their children laid them to rest side by side in the cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch, with matching headstones that said simply, "Together always." The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, and though the details of Graham and Penelope's lives faded with time, the story of how they came together never did. It remained a favorite tale in the family, passed from parent to child, a reminder of how love could grow from the smallest seed of kindness, and how showing up for someone in their darkest moment could change everything. The house they had built still stood on the land, expanded and modernized over the years, but still fundamentally the same. And if you sat very quietly on the porch on a summer evening, some said you could still hear the faint sound of piano music drifting through the open windows, and the low murmur of two voices talking and laughing together, reliving a love story that had begun with fear and patience and had grown into something that would last forever.